Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk about Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's visit to India. Uh, and it's an interesting visit. Malaysia and India's relationship had soured when Mahathir Mohamad was Prime Minister of Malaysia, and he objected to India's changing the constitutional status of Kashmir, essentially when 370 was abrogated from the Indian constitution. And so the relationship had got so bad that in 2022 there were hardly any trade between the two countries. But since the election of Anwar Ibrahim, the trade, everything, relationships have normalized extensively to such an extent that right now in Malaysia-India trade is close to $20 billion. The reason why I'm doing this particular conversation in English is because I would like our brothers and sisters in Malaysia also to be able to understand the points that I'm trying to make. These two countries are very interesting, and so while discussing the geoeconomic and geopolitical implications of Anwar Ibrahim's visit to India and the upgrading of the relationship to comprehensive strategic partnership, I will also talk about Malaysia as a country and why it is very interesting. But before that, do the needful. Subscribe to Conversation, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. So first, let's get through the preliminaries. Anwar Ibrahim visits India for the first time since he was elected Prime Minister of Malaysia. Anwar Ibrahim has a very long history, and I'm not going to go into that, but I just, however, want to point out that he has a long history with American Muslims. He is very close to many American Muslim organizations here in the United States. So in many ways, American Muslims also think of Anwar Ibrahim as one of their own. He came here as an intern when he was a very young man. And since then, he has had great relationships with various institutions in the United States. For a few years, I was associated with a think tank of which Anwar Ibrahim was a chairman. So that's as far as disclosure is concerned. But Anwar Ibrahim comes to India and the partnership increases. The media is focusing on the fact that Malaysia is trying to become essentially a member in BRICS countries. But there are lots of mutual bilateral issues which are also very important. So one of the most important things is that these two countries now trade in rupee and ringgit, which is the Malaysian currency. So basically they have succeeded in essentially de-dollarizing $20 billion worth of international trade. The two countries have a trade of about $20 billion. India exports about $7.5 to $8 billion to Malaysia, and Malaysia exports about $12 billion worth of goods to India. So this is all done in rupee and ringgit. So it also illustrates to the rest of the world that de-dollarization in international trade is possible. And as the United States gets more and more aggressive and nasty, trying to force every country to sacrifice their national interest to only advance their national interest of Israel or Ukraine, de-dollarization becomes more and more salient in global politics. More and more countries would like to get out of the weaponization of international trade by the United States in the interest of a couple of countries. So that's why this is an important demonstration effect that yes, rupee and ringgit trade happens. So rupee and other kinds of trades can happen with other countries too. As far as BRICS is concerned, Malaysia is very close to China because of its development model is based to a great extent on its manufacturing partnership with China. And then also because of the Islamic side of Malaysia, and often Malaysia has in the past, especially under Mahathir Mohamad, aligned more with Imran Khan than India. And therefore, the relations with India have not been really that well, even though Malaysia has very good relations with other major BRIC countries like China, Brazil, and South Africa. So I suspect that Malaysia's entry into BRICS was to some extent being blocked by India. But now Malaysia is repairing its relations with India. One of the purposes of Anwar Ibrahim's visit to India is essentially to improve the relationship. They have upgraded it, as I said, to comprehensive strategic partnership. But not only that, Malaysia has now supported India's position to, or India's demand to become a permanent member of the Security Council with veto rights, and Malaysia is supporting India there, like United Arab Emirates also. And so I suspect that it's kind of a quid pro quo. Malaysia supports India's elevation in the Security Council at the UN, and India supports the entry of Malaysia into BRICS. It is an easy thing for Malaysia to do because Malaysia's vote is quite irrelevant. I mean, it just increases the momentum that's saying the whole world in the global south is with India. Ultimately, India's membership in the Security Council will depend on the 5 veto-wielding countries, and if any one of them threatens to use a veto, then it will continue to remain a problem for India. But during the trip, Anwar Ibrahim was given VIP status. He went to Rajghat, he went to Raj Bhavan, he went and gave his respects to Mahatma Gandhi. He also was received, obviously, by the Prime Minister. Jaishankar, the Foreign Minister, met with him. And he also gave a lecture and so on. But it was interesting that it was not all hunky-dory, because questions were asked to him about Zakir Naik. And I have an interesting personal story to share about Zakir Naik, but Anwar Ibrahim, Zakir Naik has some kind of a refugee status, a political asylum in Malaysia, and so India asked him to extradite him. And Zakir Naik, Anwar Ibrahim said he's open to the idea of essentially extraditing Zakir Naik, but he wants to see some evidence from India. So he threw the ball back in India's court. So if India can show some evidence that will stand up to international legal scrutiny, not the kind of stuff that stands up in only Indian courts, then I think Anwar Ibrahim will be under pressure to extradite Zakir Naik. A few years ago, I was invited to a World Islamic conference in Malaysia. It was one of the biggest conference calls from all over the world came. And I remember as I entered the lobby of the hotel where the conference was, and I was also staying, there was a huge poster of Zakir Naik in the lobby with my photograph on that poster. And I was horrified to learn that I was also on the same panel with Zakir Naik. I didn't want to be on that panel with him. As you can see at the end of this video, I will post a video in which I was very, very critical of Zakir Naik. I come from a Sufi-leaning tradition. Zakir Naik comes from the Salafi. Our understanding of Islam is certainly not the same. So I wanted to so I met with the program director instantly, and I said, look, I was about to tell him that I didn't want to be on this panel. But before I could tell him that, he said, Dr. Khan, we had told you in our discussions that you'll have to speak for 20 minutes, but is it possible for you to speak for longer than that? And I said, why? He said, well, some powerful people have objected to Zakir Naik's presence at this conference, so he has withdrawn. He's not going to be here. So we're going to give you his time too. I said, of course, I'm absolutely delighted. I didn't even have to object. And so there was one less speaker on the panel. And so instead of speaking for 20, 25 minutes, I got to speak for more than half an hour. So that was an interesting connection. But I found it very interesting that the people who support Zakir Naik's presence in Malaysia are not voters of Anwar Ibrahim. So if he wants to deport Zakir Naik, there will not be a significant political cost to him. But Anwar Ibrahim also raised the issue of religious minorities in India. He said that there are serious issues with religious minorities in India, and he hoped that Prime Minister Modi would address them and resolve them. He did not go into details, but obviously he's talking about Muslims and other religious community. Anwar Ibrahim is very firm on this footing because he won election with support of religious minorities in Malaysia. So the Indian community in Malaysia, which is, by the way, one of the biggest Indian diasporas, about 3 million people, and according to some estimates, is the third biggest Indian diaspora community. So he basically got a lot of their votes when he ran for prime minister. So he's supported by Hindus and Buddhists and Christians in his political campaign. So he's seen as a leader of the religious minority, has a strong history of interfaith dialogue. So he's raising that issue with Prime Minister Modi is very interesting, that India needs to fix the issues that it has with its minorities. Let me tell you a few things about Malaysia as to why it becomes interesting. Malaysia is a very important country, even though it is relatively small, both in size and population. The population of Malaysia is about 35 million. Malaysia is 1/4 or even close to 1/5 the size of Bangladesh in population. But in terms of GDP, it is equal to Bangladesh. It's a very important trading economy. That's very important. It is a member of ASEAN. It's an important member of OIC. Malaysia is always one of the leaders of the Muslim world, which does not come from the Arab world. So non-Arab country that is a leader in the Muslim world, along with Pakistan, Iran, and Turkey. Pakistan has lost much of its appeal. Nobody in the Muslim world sees Pakistan as a leader. It sees Pakistan as a problem. But along with Turkey and Iran, Malaysia is one of the important Muslim countries. And it is also an important member of ASEAN and also an important country in the Indo-Pacific region, because it is one of the 3 Malacca Strait countries. So it has a very strategic location. It is a big trading country. Malaysia's GDP is about $500 billion, but Malaysia's GDP comes from trade. 76% of the GDP comes from international trade. That's stunning. So it's a country with about $500 billion of GDP, but nearly 75% of that would be more than $300 billion come from exports. So it's highly export driven. In fact, its total trade is more than its GDP. So for example, Malaysia's annual trade with China is about $100 billion. Its annual trade with the United States is $65 billion. Its annual trade with India is $20 billion. It also trades heavily with European Union, with Japan, and other countries in that region. So it's a fascinatingly trading partner. A lot of people who come here on my channel have very condescending and anti-Islam and anti-Muslim relations. And one of their pet line is, there is no Muslim democracy where Muslims are in majority. Well, I would like to point out to them that Malaysia is a Muslim democracy with 65% Muslim population. But what is interesting is that for the last several years, Malaysia has consistently ranked higher than India on the democracy index. Even this year, India is, I think, ranked 41 and Malaysia is ranked 40, around there. But Malaysia is ranked higher than India on the democracy index. Malaysia is also, like India, multi-religious country, multi-ethnic country. 65% of Malaysians are Muslims. 18% of them are Buddhists, who are also more or less Chinese origin. Chinese Malaysians are the biggest minority there. 6% of Malaysians are Hindu, 7% of them are Indian, so there's about 1% Indians who are either Muslim or Buddhist or other religion. There are also lots of Christians in Malaysia. So it's a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country. It is also actually United States of Malaysia in the sense that it has provinces which are governed by kings. So they also have a king. So one of the kings becomes the king of Malaysia. I met the king of Perak, who interestingly is a PhD like me in international relations, but he got his PhD from Harvard. So that was an interesting thing to find, that you're meeting a king who has a PhD in international relations from Harvard University. Malaysia is a pretty well-off country. Its GDP is, like I said, about $500 billion, but its per capita income is 13,000 per person, around 12,000 this year. So it is expected to become a developed country, a high-income country, anytime, most probably by 2028. So the goal that Narendra Modi has set for India for 2047, Malaysia is expected to achieve that by 2028. So the benchmark currently for becoming a high-income economy set by World Bank is, like I said in my previous conversations, is about $13,500 per capita, and Malaysia is around 12 to 13 between that. So it's expected to catch up and become a high-income economy in 3 years, maybe by 2027, 2028. But if you make adjustment for PPP, Indians love to do that. They just love PPP. Then, to give you a comparison, India's per capita GDP after adjustment for PPP is around $10,000. Malaysia's becomes $35,000 to $39,000. So it is, in that sense, a reasonably well-off country. Surprisingly, it is not as advanced in its digital environment as one would expect a country with this. So if you I will share a video that I made about Malaysia when Anwar Ibrahim got elected 2 years ago, one of my early conversation videos in which I had some recommendations, I think, for Anwar Ibrahim. One of them was to improve its digital capacity. So at the end of this video, you will see the links to 2 of those videos, one about Zakir Naik and one about Anwar Ibrahim. But I think the most interesting thing is that given these 2 countries, India claims to be a secular democracy, but they also talk about it as the Hindu Rashtra, and with the Prime Minister very overtly Hindu in his approach, even in his international relations, he tends to bring up Hinduism all around. Even with Malaysia, they are sneaking in some Hindutva agenda by pushing for Ayurvedic medicine to be taught in Malaysia. So that brings in basically Hindu traditional knowledge. And the Malaysians are actually accepted that, and so there will be a Hindu or a Ayurvedic professor in Malaysia somewhere. So India pretends to be or claims to be a secular democracy, while the Prime Minister continues to promote Hindu Rashtra and Hindu values and talks a lot about the Hindu traditions of India. And often it is fudged as ancient India. And Malaysia is also a Muslim majority country, which, in spite of having other religious minorities, often talks about being an Islamic state. Many of the provinces have Islamic law applicable for Muslims, and they have Islamic banking is a very big thing in Malaysia. So for both these countries, developing much closer relations are going to be very interesting. In many ways, it's like Bangladesh, which also has a large Hindu minority. So it's going to be interesting to see how the relations between these 2 countries progress further, especially if Malaysia becomes part of the BRICS and slowly begins to become a more important country in the leadership of the global South. So I hope that you found this conversation interesting. And I was supposed to speak in Malaysia on 27th of July. I was invited, but because of certain health reasons, I could not take the long flight to Malaysia. So for those of my friends in Malaysia who were expecting me to come and speak at that conference and also meet, I apologize on air to all of you. Inshallah, soon I will be coming to both Indonesia and Malaysia. So until then, we will continue to interact through Khanversations. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this with your friends and socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan. Take care.